Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Breaking into Data session. I'm Aaron Falus, founder of Promotable, and your host for tonight and every other session until we get someone else. Really happy to see everyone come back tonight. I know we had someone else also from a recruiting background last week, and I think this will give you a contrasting, but a second perspective on that space. So I'm super excited. Ben's got really deep experience, both at like big tech companies like Salesforce, and then smaller ones like Peapod, for those of you in Chicago. Way back when we used to do these events in person, we had a Peapod product manager some time ago. So for any of you who ever came to any of our talks in the Merchandise Mart, you may have come to that. But for those of you who don't know me, so I'm Aaron, of course, Promotable, who are we? So we're a data science career accelerator, just helping to close those data skill gaps. And we do that through a variety of ways, of course, primarily free events like this one, where our goal really is just to put everyone in a position where you can ask whatever questions you want to help you close that gap, put yourself in a better position, whether that's in this case for stuff like interviews or your job search, or what it really is like to work in data, whether that is in data science or on the analytics side. Ultimately our goal here is to, cut through some of those buzzwords and help everyone, whether you're a, marketer who wants to become more data driven or really understand, kind of data science stuff, our events are just for that. So on that note, please, if you have questions, throw them in the Q&A section and we'll get to them after Ben gives his talk. The second thing is, it would be really helpful just for us to know who is here. Please, and maybe if you're up to it, introduce yourself in the chat section and let us know if you already work in data or if you're looking for data opportunities, and that'll just help us get a feel for who's here and adjust accordingly. And of course, for those of you who want to dive deeper into data, we of course have our data courses as well. They're all taught by practitioners like the folks that you've seen from our events. So we have one for folks who are on the business side, so kind of data for non-technical, non-data science people. So that teaches things like SQL, Tableau, and really just drops you into the business case. And then of course we have our data science accelerator for people who are want to become data scientists. If you have any questions about that kind of stuff, feel free to reach out to me after the event. Second thing, or final announcement, this event is being recorded. I get that question every time, so I'll be dropping the YouTube channel into the chat so everyone sees that. Also, my LinkedIn profile as well. Feel free to connect. With that, Ben, take it away.
Thanks so much, Aaron. I appreciate it. And thank you all for being here. I know more time on the computer is just what folks want after work, but hopefully this is some helpful content. And I'm really excited to be here just because I've been in recruiting for quite a while now. I've been doing this for about 6 years. And I actually came from higher education. So I was advising student groups. My favorite part was, okay, well, like, you're in college now, like, what's next? Because we're never just in this current moment in time doing this forever. Things change, we have goals, aspirations, life circumstances, whatever. And I really view the job search as an opportunity to reinvent, what do you want out of this? You're spending so much time at your job, it should be something that you enjoy and an alignment of your skills and your passion. And that's what I like to kind of talk about this. So I know that we're looking in terms of, data science generally, but I think it broadly kind of comes to, what are your current skill sets and what do you want to be doing in your next job? Especially if you're coming from, a boot camp where you're learning some of these skills for the first time, or maybe you're later in your career and transitioning from something you've known for a really long time. It can be really difficult to explain, why is this the right choice for me? Why is this the right company? And so to give some insights, as Aaron mentioned, I've hired for Peapod in Chicago, which was a really fun time. I was recently at Salesforce. I'm now at a company called Spot On. We do point of sale and transaction business for small, medium businesses as well as restaurants. So we're really growing a ton. There's a fun unicorn valuation attached, which is very exciting and definitely something I spam in my LinkedIn messages. But every job has consistently been, how are we getting people in here that are going to move the needle for us? Depending on the company, depending on the industry, that needle looks a lot of different ways, and what we're going towards is very different. But it all kind of boils down to the same things. And I didn't do a slideshow because I'm on Dex enough, but I created a helpful graphic that will hopefully help. These are the 3 things. Is this backwards or is it reading?
Well, I can see it. If someone in the chat wants, just let us know that they can see it normally and not backwards. That would also be helpful.
Because,
Yep. Awesome. Thanks, Tasha and Bridget and everyone else.
Thank you so much. So these are the 3 things that I think it boils down to. We read these job descriptions and they're very technical. There's a lot of different buzzwords and technologies and tools. Sometimes we ask for tools that don't exist yet, or things that are still in beta, and asking for you to have 5 years of experience. Starting off with competencies, this first one. As a recruiter, I'm looking for just competent people. To be honest, I just want to know you can do the job. And a lot of times I think as job seekers, we do a disservice by trying to kind of guess what the employer wants. So you're going at this and saying, oh, they need like a SQL expert who knows how to analyze and transform data and do all these fancy things. When in reality, like, I just need data to look clean so that marketers can understand it. Like, that's it. I just need marketers to know this is what the table looks like. And that's a lot less complex than maybe we make the job description. So it's on employers. We make it too complex, and I'm fully, I do this myself. But competencies, can you do the job? A lot of times when you're making a resume, we're trying to look at what have we already done? What are the things in my experience that I've ever possibly done? Like, I learned to make a resume in high school when I had 0 experience. They're like, you were a crossing guard once? Throw it on there. You like math? Put it in there. Like, anything and everything. That's not actually super helpful, because again, as a hiring manager or as a recruiter, I'm looking at, can you do my specific job? So the first thing any job seeker should do, anybody that's trying to break into this, what are the actual competencies? What do I need to do? And make it very clear that I can do those things. A lot of people really like to put in the top of their resume skills or technologies, and it's just a list of buzzwords. And if you're going through an automated system, yeah, it will track them. But when you list that, SQL and PL SQL and Postgres and MongoDB, do you actually know all of those things? Are you an expert in all of those things? How have you utilized those? Are you doing basic queries, or are you joining tables and optimizing queries and looking at, how are we making sure that there's no concurrency issues with this data? Those are 2 very different things. So what I suggest is go through and make sure, in your projects, in your work experience, in your personal projects or boot camps, whatever you've done, how are you leveraging technology? Show the competency. I feel confident optimizing, queries for SQL or PostgreSQL databases. Now, as a recruiter, I know what you're getting into and kind of what you're capable of. It makes it helpful. The more I have to guess, the more question there is of like, can you do this? The more the answer is probably no. And that a lot of times reflects in, I am a data scientist eager to jump into a data analyst position to move the needle for the company. Like, excitement, great, awesome. And then we get to projects and it says, have some Kaggle competitions under my belt. Number 14 in the world in this Kaggle competition. That's great, but that doesn't necessarily demonstrate skills. And if I'm a recruiter and I don't know Kaggle, then it may be an issue, and I might say, I don't know, so I say no. Don't make us guess. Just really be explicit of what you can and cannot do, where your expertise lies, and try to demonstrate that by, this is the project, this was the tools that I used in the impact, or, this is something that I did on my own time because I wanted to kind of explore this. Talk about impact, results, how did you learn? How did you make the approach? Give us some of that why, and it really helps out. So that's the first thing, is when you're talking about these jobs, really try to understand, like, what do they need me to do, and how can I demonstrate that I'm ready to do those things? I can do that stuff. The second thing on my very important sheet, commitment. When you apply to a job and I give you a call as a recruiter and I say, oh my gosh, thank you so much for applying to Spot On. Really, really exciting. And you say, who's Spot On? Now I have further questions. Before, I was excited to talk to you. Now I say, have you seen my website? Do you know what this job is? Job seekers, like, we're applying via LinkedIn. We're throwing stuff on Indeed. I'm sending my resume out. Like, I want to get things going. all I ask is look up the website before you talk to somebody. Make sure you know what job you actually are attached to. When you're applying online, save that job description and put like, this is the resume I sent, this is the job description that I'm aligned to. Know who the company is, know our domain. I don't say commitment in terms of like you have to be married to your job or there's nothing else in life, because that is not how I approach my job at all. But we need to know that if you're getting in here, you're willing to commit to this. And I think there's a big difference between someone that said, yeah, I did a code boot camp and it's like pretty good and I'm pretty interested in data, versus, yeah, I did this as a starting point and I've been doing things on my own. I'm really passionate about this. Like I like seeing patterns in data. I like understanding how we're making better decisions and enabling the business. Those are two very different ways to approach this. And especially coming from a non-traditional background, we want to make sure that you feel like this is actually the right career path. Just thinking of this as like, you know, somebody that's applying for their first job and they say, oh yeah, like I could do sales, but like I'd be into marketing too, that's fine. Like if you don't actually know what you want out of this, then how are we going to have the conversation about how you're going to excel in this thing? So just demonstrating commitment, knowing what you're interviewing for, what the job actually is, and that you're willing to put in the work to be successful there. And you can demonstrate that by having good projects on your resume, in GitHub, in Kaggle, like wherever you're kind of doing your focus there, as well as talking about, you know, how do you learn things on the side? How are you going kind of above and beyond? A career transition takes a lot of effort. It just is. It's an addition to the job. It's above and beyond. It's not something that is just given to you. And so demonstrating that to recruiters, to hiring managers is really important, so that we're taking, again, less guesswork of, can you do this? Are you willing to do these things? But demonstrating like, yeah, I'm going back and teaching myself these things. I've already demonstrated this through projects, and I'm happy to learn about your domain. You know, if you're applying for a data role in healthcare, you should understand what kind of data you're getting into. How does it need to be formatted? What are the relevant, you know, privacy laws? Are we being aware of either like PCI compliance, HIPAA, FERPA, things like that, like depending on your domain. If you can come to an interview prepared to discuss those things and having done that research, in my book as a recruiter, that's all I need. I'm not expecting you to know everything off the bat. I'm expecting you to be committed to figuring out answers though. The last thing I want to talk about, again, very, very fancy, is character. And I do not mean this in terms of like you have an honor system and you know that thing. Like I think having character is important and being honorable. But at the end of the day, I'm looking through a lot of resumes. I'm talking to a lot of people. And in the amount of times that I've asked someone, why are you looking for something new? And they say, I want to grow and I want to learn. It's honestly 90% of the time. I hear that a lot and it's great. It's not a bad answer, but it also means nothing without context. Like, what do you want to learn? How would you like to grow? So what I mean by character is be yourself and have a personality with it. At the end of the day, like we're making an agreement to say, yeah, you specifically are the person for us. You have skills and you have competencies and we know you are committed, but ultimately we're hiring you. Who is this person? Especially, again, coming from a non-traditional background. You're not, you know, math undergrad, computer science undergrad into a data science discipline and going through that path. If you're transitioning in, you know, you are up against folks that do have, you know, the bachelor's in information management in computer science and mathematics. Why are you a better choice than them? Why is somebody that maybe has some data science experience in production not going to be as good as you? Well, that's who you are. Why are you getting into data science? Are you curious? Are you detail oriented? Do you like technology, but you don't want to be like a developer? What's the reason why you're getting into this? In the day-to-day job, what are your strengths? Why do you do things really well? You know, how are you better at your job than others in your role? And how have you demonstrated those things? So not being afraid to be more of a character and get in there of like why you want to be doing these things. And I think a great example of this is when we're discussing like about me statements or kind of statements of purpose in resumes or even in cover letters. A lot of times they go pretty generically of, you know, I am a, you know, professional with 10 years of experience in the healthcare domain looking to get into data science. And I've taken a boot camp and I'm really eager to start something new. Which if you look about this, like as a recruiter, that's basically every resume I get. There's nothing different there. And that's not a bad thing. Again, it's a really good place to start from. You're eager, you're enthusiastic, you have these things, what makes you unique? What makes you special? If I'm working side by side with you, you know, are you awesome just because you don't get flustered? Like you're never frustrated and you're always willing to take the time to explain concepts and work with people. Like, are you a people-oriented data person? Like, is that what drives you, is helping explain data to others and enabling them? Or are you more on like the science side of things where you say like, I want to know if things are statistically significant. I want to know that we're making good decisions that are, you know, not leaving some of our customers high and dry, that we're not just targeting the 90% and forgetting about the 10%, like things like that. So again, feel free to like throw in your personality to some of this. And, you know, not every company is going to be a good fit, and that's okay. If you're interviewing for a role that is very buttoned up and they're in suits and you prefer flip-flops, like that's maybe not a great company for you to work at. And it's okay to get experience at those types of companies, but just know that if you have to be a completely different person or you're not able to leverage your strengths, you're likely not going to be successful anyways. Like we have to have some level of comfort, and part of that means being who we are. So that's like, again, very high level, but it's kind of my approach to how I look at resumes and things that differentiate. Do you have the skill set to do this job well? Are you committed to doing the job well? Will you show up on time and like be here? And then who are you as a person, and why does that make a difference in terms of our job? Especially with the pandemic, a lot of roles are remote now. A lot of companies are rethinking, what is our hiring process? How do we do things well? How do we create intentional spaces when we can't physically be with each other? This is a great opportunity to showcase who you are through the resume, and a way to kind of differentiate yourself, to say, no, I'm not lacking in skills because I haven't done this since the day I was born. I'm not, you know, bad at my other career, so I'm trying to kind of scrape to something new. This is a passion of mine. This is something I'm interested in. I genuinely am curious about data and helping others understand it. This is why I'm an asset to your company. Leverage what you've already done in your past career if you have that. If you haven't and you're still figuring that out, what are hobbies that differentiate you, ways of thinking that differentiate you? Data is cool because there's the very much math and science side of spreadsheets and tables and just looking at rows and rows of data. There's a visualization. How are we actually making this impactful? Especially if you're looking at a marketing function. You know, if you're an artist and you have a good eye for design, mention that. That's a really important thing to know when we're talking about data visualization. If you can do the JavaScript of, yeah, I know how to automate some things and kind of like move some stuff with Python around, but I know how to use D3 and I can actually visualize in Python, in JavaScript, or, you know, using basic HTML, CSS to make things pretty. Man, that's a pretty unique skill set. That's pretty cool. So if you have a background in design or photography or, you know, anything like that, even if you like drawing on the side, mention that. That's something that's important as we talk about getting the message across, because data science at its core is getting messages across. We're trying to understand pieces of our business that are unclear with data to make better decisions. But if you can't explain it and you're not able to show why it's valuable, it's kind of meaningless. And you're doing the same thing in your job search. The data is just you as a person and your skill sets. One other thing I wanted to talk through as well is just in terms of the job search. The competency piece comes first. You need to be good at what you do. You need to go through exercises and be able to speak to how are we running a SQL query? What are basic operators there? What do they mean? How are we cleaning data? How are we moving it around and getting it into different formats for people? Things like that. Like that's always the foundation. The next piece too, though, is networking. So I'm not sure if it was touched on last week, but coming to events like this, engaging with organizations like Promotable, really digging in, like, are there mentors that you know or other people in data science, and just asking them questions about their day-to-day. That also helps prepare for interviews and feel like you know what's going on. Somebody that's in an entry-level position that you're angling for, asking them, what did they have to learn on the job? What were their interview questions like? What's been their experience and what's their career path? Now you have a little bit of an insight into their world, and so you can ask better questions and be more informed of, oh, I'm doing data for marketing. This person mentioned that I probably want to mess with, Marketo, or understand email campaigns a little bit more. Start doing that research, understand how does SEO work and how are we pulling that data to leverage decisions, or what's a successful social media campaign? How is that data being crunched if you don't know? Because again, going into an entry-level role with a background that is maybe not fully baked in data, the more you know about the domain and can cut through some of those entry-level questions, the more, again, you're showing the commitment and your competencies. So much of work now is being able to learn, so highlighting that as well.
Yeah, that's actually a really, really good last point about, I mean, at least in my opinion, like reaching out to someone and learning rather than like saying, hey, can you refer me or like give me a job? But if you like make friends, not make friends, but ask someone, hey, like, what do you do? What does that mean? What should I be learning?
Yeah.
Amazing point. I think we've got a few questions in here already. For those of you who put the questions into the chat, I'm going to try and go through that, but there's a chance it gets missed. Going forward, just feel pleased to throw stuff into the Q&A because that'll just help keep it organized for us. But one of the questions I did kind of see pulling out of the chat, Bridget asked a really good question. We've all been there where we've applied to like, I remember applying to like thousands of jobs, right? You go on LinkedIn, you apply for all of them, and like most of the time it's like, I've heard of you, but like, how should you approach that? Like, you're not going to remember all of them, but how do you make it feel like it's not like, who are you again? Because I agree. Like when I'm recruiting for promotable roles and I hear that, I'm like, yeah, this is over. Because you didn't even make the effort to pretend.
Yeah, and it's hard. Like there are so many places to apply and there's so many like automated processes that it can feel super transactional. We've all applied and felt really good about it and get the auto, hey, thanks, but no thanks. We don't like you. Yeah. And that's pretty soul crushing. Like that is not a fun place to be. In terms of balancing the job search, I kind of think of it in a couple of tiers. Like as a recruiter, when I'm sending messages on LinkedIn or something, I'm like, ooh, this person's amazing. They hit all my boxes. I like them. They're personable. You're getting a personalized, like, listen, I really appreciate you. I'd love to talk more. Like they're getting the full white glove treatment. Then there's the second tier of like, they might be good. They might not. I don't know. Like I'll mention kind of why I think this could be good, but like ultimately they might need to sell me a little bit. I don't know. And then there's some folks that it's like, cool, seems like you have a job and you list the skills. I guess you're getting a stock message. Like, you've given me nothing. I know nothing about you. I'm just going to kind of send it. And like, if you want to reach out, that's cool, but I'm not worried. I view the job search the same way. It's a marketing mix. What are the companies you really like? Like who would be a dream job? You found it. It hits everything, like their culture, their job, the domain. It's perfect. You like lovingly craft. You're like, this is my resume built for you. This is my cover letter where I talk about from day one when I was born, this is why I'm your company. Like, hire me. This is amazing. Do like 1 to 2 of those a week. Like, try to kind of keep on that of, I'm really researching. I feel like the company has a good like company culture. This data job is really good. Like, this is perfect. 1 to 2 a week. Then you want like 3 to 5 where you're like, okay, they look good. I maybe don't know, but like, I will customize a little bit. I will make sure I know what the requirements are. My resume is kind of tailored to them, but one resume for like these 3 job applications, talking to what they do, personalized but not over the top. These are the ones I'm saving. Like I'm downloading a PDF of the job description. I'm putting it in a folder to say, this is this resume, this is this job. I know what's going on, any other resources or things that I have. And that's where I'm maybe also reaching out. Do I know somebody on LinkedIn that works there and I could talk to? I don't say, hey, I applied for a job. Can you get it for me? I say, listen, I'd love to learn more. Like, this seems like a super cool company. Can I buy you coffee and learn about their culture? Or, hey, so you're in marketing. Like, can you just tell me, like, how do you all use data? Like, is that in the company ethos? Is that something that's like tough? Like, you're starting to build a mental map of like, who's the organization? What do they value? What's their interview process? You're not trying to ask for a job. Like, you're not trying to say, hey, can you talk to this hiring manager? Because that's uncomfortable. You're just trying to get a sense of who is this company. And then when you're going through the interview process, you say like, oh, I have a friend that works here. I picked their brain. I went through your website. I looked at your blog. Commitment. Like, we are engaging in these. Those are the top tier ones. After that, like, yeah, auto apply. If they get back to you and they say, we're so excited to talk, can you talk tomorrow? You say, yeah, hey, I'm so sorry. Actually, I lost the link for this. Like, it doesn't seem like it's posted. Could you refresh that? Could you just send that again for me? It's an easy way to just say like, hey, I don't want to tell you I forgot, but I forgot. Could you just send this? A good recruiter is happy to send that initially. If you get to the phone call and you don't know, or you ask on a phone call, who's this for again? What's this role? That's going to be kind of a game ender there. So make sure you're following up via email beforehand, or try to use context clues of go to LinkedIn, search their name. It'll tell you the company that they work at and you'll kind of know. If it's an agency, like they work for a third party, like where, Lucas Group, or we're at Robert Half or something like that, just kind of ask them, hey, can you share what the company name is, or what are some identifying things? They may protect that. They might not tell you. And in which case, just be honest about what you're looking for. Don't try to guess for the job. Just say, like, this is who I am. This is what I bring. This is what I want. To the other part of your question around like things on a resume or a job application that are big red flags for me. One is having a resume that doesn't match what we're looking for. Again, I don't mean in terms of job description, jobs. Like, I don't need you to have been a data analyst to consider you for that role. But if you don't mention data at all, if you've been, in customer service your entire career, but you've applied to a data analyst job and you make no mention of projects or being at a boot camp or using data on the side, I'm going to reject you because you've not shown that there's a link to what you're doing and why this job matters to you. If, again, you can say, this is how I'm building this up. I don't have production level experience, but these are projects that I'm working on. These are classes I've attended. Here's a GitHub with projects I'm hosting for you to view, code that you can see. That stuff is super important. Kaggle profiles are also really good if you're doing things online there. But ultimately, I need to see a project piece on your resume to say, I downloaded this data set and was able to do these manipulations and found this thing, or these are tools that I'm doing, online reviews of, things like that. Like, you have to show these are the skills I'm actively applying and this is how I'm learning these, because otherwise, again, we won't know. Other things that like I cry internally just when I see are like bad spelling, grammar, really like, do not send a Word document, send a PDF always. Send a PDF with your name and either the title, because again, that's an easy way to say like, oh, this is what I applied for, or something like that. Making sure that it's all relevant to the job. There's a lot of times where people add in like volunteer experience or community service, which I think is phenomenal. But then it's like a very odd, like, make it relevant to what we're kind of going for. Not that everything you do in your life has to be focused on job, but if you're volunteering with an animal shelter, make sure it's for a good amount of time. And like, how are you showcasing like either working with a team or caring about others or being dedicated? Like, put it to an attribute, not just like, hey, I love dogs. Because again, we're trying to get a sense of what are you bringing to the job. And those are kind of in addition to, not necessarily the meat of your resume. Other things too is like inflating what you've done. I can pretty quickly tell if you've not done the job or if you're kind of making things up about it. So again, just be accurate with what you're doing and post actually what you've kind of done.
Awesome. Yeah, those are some really good points. Yeah, the spelling error is, I mean, it's one thing if it's like one little small thing somewhere, but when it's just like littered, it's like, well, if you can't do this for the thing you're sending to all the jobs, I've got questions about your general spelling.
One other thing I forgot to mention as well is, we all learn from like usually high school or college, wherever we went to school in the world, how to do resumes. And adjusting it to the US context. So if you didn't grow up in the US and have not job searched here a lot, looking at some examples, it doesn't have to be 2 pages. But if you're career transitioning and you don't have a lot of experience, try to cut it down, because if you're looking at a 6-page resume of everything you've ever done, now I have to parse through 6 pages to see what's relevant. Instead, focus to 1 to 2 pages of, this is data. This is what I'm trying to do. It's a lot more effective. So try to make sure that, you're not listing a lot of just like blurb about yourself at the beginning or all of the tools and tech on the first page. Like, try to get some work experience in the first page. Try to get either projects or educational experience, whatever is most relevant, on that first page. So when I read, again, recruiters are real dumb. We don't want to look for answers. We don't want to try to make a guess of what you're trying to get at. Make it very distinct. I want to be doing data science. These are the data science projects I've been having. These are relevant skills or job experiences that I have to data science. If you put those breadcrumbs of data science, I will follow them and I will move you forward. Because at the end of the day, my whole job is to hire people and not look dumb. I want to not look dumb. And if your resume, if I think that I might look dumb after presenting your resume, I won't send it along. So I want the hiring manager to see immediately, yep, they have potential for this job. If they don't see that immediately, I may not send you. So really putting a strong impression there.
One question actually that I had that kind of ties in, because I know you've done like big company recruiting and kind of smaller company recruiting. Is there a difference for you, like when you're looking at like candidates, or like how I don't know if maybe there's no difference, but I'm kind of curious if that has any impact, especially when you're looking at like spot on, like you're like user candidates that probably wouldn't fly at like a larger company, but here we're like, this actually makes sense because we're growing.
Yeah, it really depends on the company and it depends on the team. But
Mm-hmm.
broadly speaking, if you're applying to a really large company, there's kind of two roles that exist. One is we have so much work to do and not enough people to do it, and so anyone will be okay. And what I mean by that is like, hey, we're willing to train. We probably have a really good system. A lot of this is just super manual process that like we haven't automated yet, or we don't know how to automate. So ETL pieces, cleaning up data, like doing data munging, like some of those pieces that are just too manual and technical to be automated, there's a lot of good opportunity in large companies because they say like, hey, this marketing team is pulling batch processes every day and we got to quickly transform them into their dashboard so they can make insights because the next campaign is rolling out tomorrow. Like those are really good roles. Other roles at super large companies are highly niche, and they were saying, not only do we need a SQL expert, but we need a SQL expert that is in the healthcare domain that has 20, like so specific that if you don't hit that, it'll be an automatic decline. It's not that you're not skilled. It's not that you're not good. It's that you have not spent 4 years consulting and then moving into healthcare and are now wanting to do this. It's like, it's an oddly specific job. And when you get those rejections, it's like, nope, you were not one of the 100 people in the US that can do that. Sorry. So for large companies, I feel like it depends on the team, which is why, again, if you have contacts there, or of someone near that, just asking and saying, hey, what are they looking for? Like what's kind of the profile here? And I think too, if you're looking at a job description that under the must-haves, they're listing technologies, a few technologies that you don't have experience with, or maybe only done courses with, but aren't super sure on, that's probably a good indicator that you're not going to be a good fit, especially once they start throwing in more, specific Python packages or frameworks of, hey, unless you've delivered services in Python, and, leveraged, scikit-learn and pandas often, if you've not done that in your day-to-day, that's probably not going to be a good fit for you because, again, they're looking for something specific. Smaller companies, startups especially, there is a like baseline skill gap that like, if you don't hit, it just will not. There's no way you're going to get that job because like there's not enough time to train people. Like we don't have enough bandwidth to really walk and handhold someone through something. By the same term though, if you show that you are eager and willing to learn and like this resonates with you, there's a lot of opportunity to say like, okay, we maybe won't offer you at the comp that you want or maybe the level, but we'll give you a level below. And once you're good, we'll train you and we will get you there. But you're just not quite there. But like, we love your personality. We love that you're eager, enthusiastic. So I think it depends so much on the team, but especially with startups, if you can demonstrate again, like I have the competencies, I'm committed to doing this and putting in the effort to make this successful. And then you show why this is a good fit, not just any company, but like this specific, there's some really good opportunity for people that, again, I took the class, I'm doing this on my own. Like I'm spending time learning SQL. I am banging my head against a computer, figuring this out, but I'm doing it. That goes a long way with startup teams because so much of a startup is, oh, we don't really know what we're doing. Like we're figuring it out. Do you want to figure it out with us? And if you can figure things out, man, that goes a long way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm heavily biased being a startup guy myself. So what I will say is like, take it with a grain of salt, but my opinion is if you're trying to break in, startups are a good place to do that because the bar can be higher, but also can be a lot lower to get your foot in the door. And when they grow, you grow, as long as you're willing to do the work and show that you can learn.
And I will say, like, I transitioned from, I had several years of experience in higher ed and decided recruiting was my path. And a startup gave me a break. They said, yep, you were going to side over in terms of like compensation going from a nonprofit to for-profit. Like, we're not going to give you an extra dime, but we'll let you do this. And I am the recruiter I am and as good as I am purely because they took the chance and were willing to train me. And I provided value right away. Like, it was a recruiting boutique, and I went from working on one client to 9 of our 12 in the first 6 months and delivering volume and going kind of above and beyond. And so it was a really good win-win. But again, I had to really sell them on these are my transferable skills. Here's how I learn things. Like being able to leverage, I have a math degree in my undergrad. That was really helpful to be able to say like, listen, I get the number pieces. I can talk through analytically. But again, I was bringing who am I as a character? Like some of my humor was in my interviews. Absolutely. Some of the like, I don't know this answer was in the interviews. I had to kind of find that right fit. And, you know, again, that was also, I met that through, I knew one of their interns. And so that was a connection that I brought in as well, which I think is super important.
Yeah, no, that's, I mean, totally true. It kind of ties into one of the questions Greg was asking about how do you, and this is, I'll broaden the question because I think it applies to a lot of people who are taking, you might have a base skill set, maybe, you know, maybe there might be, you don't have a data science title, but you do, whether it's ETL work or something else, right, or a data analyst, you know, type work. How do you leverage maybe a course that you took to kind of like talk about that skill and say, hey, well, I have some skills and I'm learning this skill, or like, when is it appropriate? Because I think sometimes, in my opinion, I see a lot of people who say, oh, I took this class, and I'm like, cool, why do I care? I think one of the challenges is like, you know, as Greg says, you know, how do I don't have job experience, but I've done this thing, I think I know it. Like, how do you show? You mentioned a little bit, but I figure we'll just dive into it because I think it's probably a question on a lot of people's minds.
Yeah. I think when we're looking at resumes, there is that standard, like, you know, what was your year of graduation? What have you done since? Are you there 2 to 4 years? Like, there are biases that exist that can be indicators of success, but are not often. But getting again back to my point of, as a recruiter, I just don't want to look dumb. And if you in your resume are saying, you know, sabbatical, took time away with no other details, and you had, you know, 3 months at one job, a sabbatical for 1.5 years, and then 3 months at another contract, I am concerned, like, what are you committed to? How are you seeing things through? Like, do you actually know what you want? Because again, I don't want to hire someone that then 3 months later says, nah, this isn't fun for me. I'm not doing this. So I'm just extrapolating on the minimal data I have. But if you say, you know, 3 months and then took a sabbatical and then another 3 months, and you're explaining like, this was a contract that allowed me to, you know, do a bunch of Visual Basic stuff. It's not my forte, but I really wanted to dig into Excel, and I had a little of this from a past job. So like, this was this purpose. Then I took a sabbatical to take classes. These are the classes that I took. These are the skills that I worked on. Here's a link to some projects. Now I'm taking another contract because I'm better at SQL now. So I'm getting more like, okay, now I see 3 months to upskill, time to learn, 3 months to upskill. Like, that's a very different story. So it's all in how we present things. If you have a gap in your resume, you know, if it was for, you know, you got fired from a job because you weren't performing. Okay, not great. Like, that's a thing that's a red flag for a recruiter. But what's the context? Was there mental health issues? Were there family things? What's going on? It's perfectly legitimate, again, just to reframe, not to say like, hey, I got fired for low performance, but again, to say like, there were personal issues and I was able to meet expectations. Those are now over. Like, I've learned from that. I've grown. And again, showing like, yeah, this is my life and this is a point in it, but this is where I am now. These are the classes I'm taking. This is how I'm committed, things like that. So it's all in how you tell your story in terms of work experience versus like taking classes and things like that. Just contextualizing. I think it's super valuable to say, you know, this past job, I was, you know, store manager for like a retail operation. No, I wasn't doing data science, but I was in charge of the Excel spreadsheet looking at what's our P&L for the day, or what were hours and like salary paid versus store revenue. Like, what data were you digging into and how are you recontextualizing? Don't look like from your experience towards the next job, look from the next job back on your experience. So take the job description, the company you love, what you really, really want to do, look at all those bullet points and say, how do I represent this in my resume? And that can be a mix of classes, like three plus years of SQL knowledge. That's a pretty standard, like, you know, senior data scientist, mid-level, something like that. Okay, no, I don't have 3 years of data science, but I've been taking SQL classes for 3 years. I, you know, was digging into the SQL database at my past job. So I'm going to say, dug into the SQL database, took a SQL class, currently doing these SQL projects. Now I'm building a history towards the bullet point of 3 years work experience. Mm-hmm. If you don't have the technical experience, if you're not doing data science, what are those nice to haves? What are the in addition? What's in their company culture? Teamwork, you know, decision making, working well under pressure, you know, collaboration. all of those things that we kind of throw away is like, yeah, I'm collaborative, it's fine, I do teams. Throw that in to say, listen, I worked in a really high stress environment. I was, managing a bookstore that, I'm working with vendors and I'm working with irate customers because their back order wasn't there, whatever it was. That's working well under pressure. That's collaborating. That's working with different stakeholders. Like, reframe it in the language of the job. So rather than, oh, I worked with a bunch of store associates, no, I worked with a bunch of stakeholders. That's the way to kind of get towards, look at this job description bullet point. That's what I did. It's the game of like word bank in like a 10th grade Spanish class. What's the word in Spanish? What's the word in English? And just draw the line. You're doing that with the current job that you want and your current resume. That's all you do with those things.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I mean, I had a very similar experience with someone that I was mentoring. It was like one of those like interview prep things. And he showed me his resume, and this was someone who was like trying to break in, like didn't have the most education, like associate's degree, and was like just trying to get the next thing. And I saw on his resume that, I worked with a team of like 4 people, and I was like, were you managing them? He was like, yeah, but I mean, I was like, oh, so you were a team lead and you organize 5 people. As someone who is like, being a manager is hard, especially the first time. Like, I was terrible. Right? You learn, you fuck up. Now YouTube's not gonna like this video, and then you and then you move on, right? But it's something that's like really hard skill, and like those are things that like are super important because that you're hireable, right? You can grow. Like all those things are like super valuable. Anyway, one more question that just came in, and I had a thought, but we've got someone who's, I think kind of in the thick of it, doing lots of interviews, has been to like the final round a few times, is, kind of just obviously kind of struggling with like how do I stand out and make myself, I think part of it is just like, you got to push through and keep going. But I love your take there.
Yeah. And I think this is where like the job search being a grind really comes to fruition. Like, it's not fun. It is sometimes between you and an internal candidate that a week ago decided, oh yeah, I'll apply, or a referral that happened to say, hey, I'm interested, and it happens. It's not ideal. It's just the way recruiting works. If you're getting to final interviews, I think the only way that you can really push through that kind of final barrier is asking for feedback, building a good relationship with your recruiter, and debriefing. So the way that I operate is I kind of invest as much as you want to. Like, if you're giving me just stock messages and like going through the interview and saying, yeah, it was fine. Like, okay, good. I'm glad it was fine. We'll move through the next. Like, that's not bad, but great. If you want feedback and you are interested in how things are going, just follow up and make a connection with the recruiter. And then at the final time when they say, hey, like it was close, but we went with someone else, ask for feedback and say like, what could have put me over the edge? Sometimes it is skills. It is purely like, listen, they are much better at SQL than you are, and that's what we need right now. And that is hard to swallow, but it's true. Sometimes it's presentation. I have a candidate that I was working with in the past that is phenomenal technically, amazing at architecture and system design and all of these wonderful things and like the engineering mindset, but he'd cut people off in interviews. And when they'd ask questions, he wouldn't let them finish fully getting the thought out. When he was explaining things, if they didn't get it the first time, he just kind of reiterated it the same way. And we didn't give offers purely because of communication. And that's something I told him because he asked. He said, man, like, I feel like I'm getting close, but I'm just not there. And I said, you need to think about your audience. Who are you talking to? If they feel like you're going to cut them off, why would they listen to you as a coworker? In the interview process, you are exactly explaining who you are. And so, if you're getting to final interviews and they don't give you feedback, think through like, okay, how is my communication? Like, maybe do some mock interviews. Find somebody that you really trust that's in the role that you want, or that is a hiring manager elsewhere. Ask them to just kind of walk through that, because sometimes we get so lost in the technical that we forget to explain, what's the application, or why did we do the thing? We're so talking about what instead of why and how. Other times, we just kind of string buzzwords together. We say, oh yeah, it was, 1 terabyte of data that I had to, use a lot of transformation on, and we did SQL, but I don't know why you did this thing or how you did it. So being aware of what are you actually communicating, things like that, I think is important. but yeah, just getting feedback, moving through those things. And also, like, sometimes if you've hit 2 or 3 in a row, take a refresh your resume, like look at it again now that you've gone through some of these things, look at your bullet points, and kind of a little to what we were just talking about, but take kind of a third-party view of your experience. So when we're in a job or we're in a career, we kind of take things for granted, like, oh yeah, I guess I manage people, or I guess I'm in charge of $10,000. Like, who knew? Yeah, I kind of do it. We get really comfortable very quickly. Take a step back and write down, like, what are your strengths? Just write down, like, what are you good at in your job? Because it's easy to be humble and to say, like, oh, I'm gonna just kind of do whatever. This is your chance to brag. This is for your chance to say, like, no, like, I'm very good at data. I've been doing these classes for a year. I am like in it. I'm doing as much as I can to learn. I'm good with data. Be bold about that. Be honest. And then when you do the technical questions, knock it out of the park instead of being like, well, like, I dabble and stuff like that. Like, this isn't the time to be meek. If you find yourself prone to arrogance or you kind of have a more cocky attitude, maybe rein it in. But 9 times out of 10, the folks I speak with are meek and they undersell themselves, and that can cost interviews.
Yeah, that's for sure. The next question is more of a process thing, you can all feel this, like, where you're sending applications into, like, the black hole, and the question is, should we assume that that the resume is getting looked by someone, or should we assume that it's just initially all going through a bot, and then kind of whatever's next? But
yeah. So I love, like. And I say, I'm like, put the buzzwords in, make sure the bot doesn't scan it out. I've never used that technology. So, like, again, I was at Salesforce. Every application that is going through, someone is looking at. There may be hundreds of applications. It may be one very tired person looking at them, but a human is reviewing those. A lot of times with, like, those very quick rejections, it's, again, like, you're either not demonstrating the necessary experience, or what I've also seen too is, broad job descriptions, 3+ years of experience, when in reality they want 7 years. They don't say that because they want those really good, potentially more junior folks or people that kind of are cut against the grain that are really good. But a lot of times, they say we want 1 year of experience, they actually want 3, or they say 5 and they mean 5, but the SQL is non-negotiable or Python is non-negotiable. So, like, there's a lot of times just, like, a pretty key requirement that's not expressed explicitly that you're not meeting, but it's not usually an AI auto reject. And I think, we're trying to apply to a lot of places, get a lot of good looks. It is worth doing due diligence on, like, what is this company's aim? What's kind of their company culture? What are they doing? Because if, you don't have that background or you don't know what their domain is, that may be a huge part of the role. And especially with data, contextualizing data, understanding who are our customers. They don't want to teach that sort of stuff. They'd rather somebody that knows it. So again, like, make your resume look like that. If you do have that experience, or do some research, you can speak to it in your resume or projects or things like that.
Awesome. I'm just kind of scrolling through and found this great question. What's your favorite question to ask candidates in general? And if you were a spirit animal, who would you be and why?
Excellent questions. So my favorite question to ask people over time has shifted. I think as I become more of a senior recruiter and get a feel more of people, I honestly really like learning, like, what's next. Like, you're at a job and there's a reason why you're moving. Like, you either don't want your current job, or you're just, like, not growing or whatever. But I really love engaging with people with, like, what's next? And not just in terms of, like, the day-to-day stuff, but, like, do you want to be a people leader? Do you want to dig more into this? Like, do you want to be more technical? Like, this is why I like to be a recruiter, is you have this skill set, we have this problem, and this is our offer, and it's perfect, and everybody loves it. Like, those are my favorite moments. When people don't have a good understanding of what they want, or they just say kind of blanket, like, I want to grow. Like, okay, now I'm less enthusiastic, because if you're going to be making a move, like, you're going through these interviews, you're taking the time to make your resume, shouldn't it be something you really want to do? Like, shouldn't it be something you actually care about? And if it's just a job to clock in and clock out, that's also fine. Everybody approaches jobs differently, but I spend enough time at my job or do these things that I really want it to be like, hey, here's this next level for me. Like, if I care really about my family, this is how this job enables that. And I want to hear those things. So honestly, my favorite question is, like, why something new? And then in terms of spirit animal, I do have one. Through various like jokes and odd circumstances, I think I would be a bison. And to prove it, I actually have got a little buffalo tattoo. So that's probably my spirit animal. Thank you for asking.
I'm not gonna lie, I half expected you to just like skip the spirit animal questions. So I'm actually really excied that you.
Hey, happy to chat about spirit animals. Anybody?
The fact that you have it tattooed in your forearm is so much better.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something broken inside me that finds it amusing, but hey. One other question is, should prior but not related experience be included, or is it better to just give that space to projects?
I think about it, again, from the lens of the job that you want. What is, if you're telling a story, what details matter and what details don't? You know, what is the thrust of what you're trying to get? Like, at the end of the day, this is all just communication. You have a message of, hey, I'm great for your job. You encode it in a resume. It gets transmitted to a recruiter or hiring manager. They decode it and say, oh, this person's great for my job. If it's not relevant, how could it be relevant is kind of how I'd answer that. So say that you know, I worked in IT in college. I've done nothing with IT, even though I do tech recruiting. I've not put that on a single job description since I got my first full-time job. It's just not relevant. Like, no one cares that I was cleaning keyboards and like helping people print stuff, because my job doesn't require it, and the customer service skills and those things like didn't matter. Try to make the experience relevant, and if you can't, yeah, I would leave it off. It's also one of those, like, we like to see longevity in jobs and kind of commitment. So if you were there for 5 years and it was really formative, like 2 bullet points of, hey, this is high level responsibilities, and then move on. Again, if we're looking at a resume of maybe 2 pages, if you have 10 years of work experience, condense the stuff that's not data or not recent down to like as small as possible. Do more emphasis on your projects and current coursework, things like that. If you're doing a career transition, if you don't have experience there, it's totally fine to just say like past work experience, 99 to 2020. I'm happy to talk about it. It was generally in hospitality. It's not relevant, and that's okay. Like, you're giving what you did, but you don't have to go into details of like, flipped tables, like, rolled silverware, things like that. Like, because we don't care.
What if like you're, I don't know, like 3 to 5 years kind of like out of college, like you have like some experience, but like if you took out the last job or 2 jobs, you'd be like way under a page. In that case, would you recommend leaving it in there, but just trying to make it as relevant as possible, or just kind of like some sort of finessing it?
Yeah, at the end of the day, like, every job is, hey, I will give you money to perform a service or a duty or something. Like, that's the basic transaction. Those are always relevant to a certain degree, whether it's, listening to leaders and following their action, problem solving, dealing with unexpected consequences or like unexpected events, things like that, overcoming obstacles. We can always talk about those things. But yes, if you don't have a lot of work experience, just try to make it relevant. I'm trying to think of a good example of like, sports management or something like that. Like, say you went to school for like personal training and you were doing that and realized like, wow, I hate working live events. And if I have to tape another ankle, I will hurt someone. I do not want to do this. I want to get into data. I don't have a specific domain. I just like that. I liked math in high school. I ditched it in college for the physiology. Let's do this. Cool. Let's talk about, being a physical therapist, like that training. How are you interacting with stakeholders? How are you part of a larger team? How are you memorizing data and things to then apply in the field and working with stakeholders, things like that? Like, what are the core principles of data science of like, hey, communicating data, following procedures, making sure that we have quality results, like, that's translatable. Try to match those things up. I recently was speaking with a candidate that got into med school, decided he hated it, and is now doing computer science instead. But he's talking about the relevancy of, yeah, studying super late for med school, staring at a book for hours, memorizing terms, turns out dovetails really nicely to computer science. Leverage that. Like, no, those are 2 different fields, but being able to sit and bang your head at a problem and get it done, that's a really, like, that's perseverance, that's attention to detail, that is like driving towards success even when it's not easy, those are all super relevant. Pull those things from your job. And again, why were you exceptional at that? Not I did the duties, but I did them well. Like I influenced process, I helped people feel better, like we got more efficient. What were those things that you suggested that said, oh, this is a better process now? Because that's what you bring into the current job.
Yeah, and the other point of that is, hey, like if you went to med school, say with that example, hey, maybe you apply for a data role at a hospital, right? Or something like that, where you're like, I don't want to be a doctor, but I understand enough to actually understand, because data, like, if you don't understand the context, I mean, it's almost useless, right? It's like it's literally a liability. If you don't understand why you're doing what you're doing, you're not helping a company. You're not linking it to a business. But if you can say, actually, I know which of these like 10 columns is actually the most relevant because I've actually been there, super valuable. And then last question of the night from Tasha. So she's asking about, again, she's transitioning. So how do we demonstrate experience without having experience, right? Specifically, portfolio is something that always gets brought up. What do you think makes a good project or a portfolio project?
Yeah. The reason why we are using data science and seeing this explosion in data right now is to try to make businesses more successful. Like there's always a tangible result of, if I know how this marketing campaign worked, I can recreate that, or I can hone in on those insights and make more successful marketing campaigns. So there's always a why that we're doing things. And I think the best projects speak to that. So if you can, what is data in your current life that could be analyzed and be used and helpful? This can be, I am trying to budget to make a house. So I pulled all of my financial data via APIs into my own database, and I am trying to crunch those and identify trends. And I'm learning, what's the housing market and what does that need? I'm learning investments. I'm learning kind of like personal finance strategy, and I'm applying it to my situation. So now when you're in an interview, you can say, oh yeah, I'm trying to buy a house. I wanted to see if I could do it. I pulled all the data, which is important in like data gathering, finding different sources. I got it to a format I like to use, which is, a Jupyter notebook or a Tableau instance or whatever you like to use. And then I crunch the numbers. And turns out if I do this plan, I can buy a house in 5 years. Or if I move to this market, I can do pull the marketing from Zillow. Like there's a ton of public APIs you can pull this data from and say, listen, I matched my current budget against housing trends. These are the 5 areas in the country I could move right now and buy a house. That's why I did this project. Like I wanted to know where I could own a home. We're doing remote work. I'm going to move to Tulsa. Let's do this. The other option too is, are you involved in a nonprofit? Is there a neighborhood event, community, something that you like? Do they have any data needs? It doesn't have to be massive, but even if it's just as simple as they were operating off of an Excel spreadsheet and it turns out they needed an Access database, like that was going to be the move to make them more effective, or they were doing everything manual, row by row by row. I built just a quick layer over that, or a form that then every expense goes into a Google spreadsheet. Now they're in the cloud instead of on like a desktop Excel spreadsheet. They have a form that when they're on the go and they're getting donations, they can just add it in, whatever. And now I'm looking at analysis to say, hey, listen, this annual bake sale you do every fall accounts for 99% or 94% of your total yearly earnings. Scrap the rest of the stuff, focus on this, or do another one competing in the spring. Because now we're pulling real data, we're solving real problems, and you're providing actionable insights. You're showing the spreadsheet, and in an interview, you can say I helped them increase donations by 20% just by this quick trick. Like the data was there. They couldn't read it in the Excel spreadsheet. They couldn't see the rows. So I made a pie chart for them. I made a bar graph. I did something to say this stakeholder now knows data. I helped them do that. Man, that's so impactful versus, oh, here's a project that lives online. 1,000 people did it. Like I did fine. Like make it meaningful, make it mean something. You're solving problems with data. And again, you're also showing that, hey, you're helping other people too.
That's a great answer. One thing I leave everyone with is don't do a pie chart. If there's one
for bake sales, I wanted to stay on brand.
I've been told you get one pie chart in your life. Use it wisely. And so, but that said, thanks everyone for coming. Really, really great questions. Really enjoying a lot of really quality, thoughtful questions that we're getting. So please keep them coming. next week we've got a different topic, but still, one of the pieces of feedback that I've gotten oftentimes from like those directors of data science and data analytics, which is really that our candidates, they know Python, they know how to code, all this stuff, but they forget how to connect that to the business problem. And so we have someone from Amazon coming on the data science side talking about connecting data to business problems next week. So look out for that. We'll go from there. Please like and subscribe. Always hate to do the shameless plug here, but it's very helpful. It sounds stupid, but super helpful for small companies like ours. And I hope to see everyone next week. Thanks again, guys. Awesome.
See everyone.